Let's do this. Okay, so everyone is in the right meeting, right? This is worker power, online to offline organizing, and emerging unions. Good? Okay. Let's get rolling. All right. Who's ready to talk about fighting the boss and building worker power? Come on, I said, who's ready to talk about fighting the boss and building worker power? Woo. Hell yeah. My name is Maximilian Alvarez. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Real News Network in Baltimore, where we lift up the voices and stories of people on the front lines of the struggle for better workplaces, better communities, and a better world. I also host the podcast Working People, where for years I've been conducting in-depth interviews with workers from all walks of life, from all around the U.S. and beyond. I'm the author of The Work of Living, a collection of interviews I conducted with workers at the end of year one of COVID, and I host the Art of Class War segment on Breaking Points. I've made it my life's work to honor the humanity and lift up the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of our fellow workers. And that work has afforded me the honor of connecting with incredible human beings and real-life superheroes like our amazing panelists today. We've got Harry Marino, who helped minor league baseball players unionize last year. Let's give it up. And we got Jamie Edwards, president of Trader Joe's United and a veteran worker at the Hadley, Massachusetts store, the first store to unionize in the country. Let's give it up. And here's what I want you to leave this panel with. You too can be part of this movement. You can be the hero that you've been waiting for, and we need you. I don't know if you guys have heard, but we've got a class war on our hands, and shit is popping off. As we speak, Hollywood entertainers represented by SAG-AFTRA are joining their union siblings with the Writers Guild of America on the picket line for the first time since 1960. And make no mistake, the future of the entertainment industry is at stake. Studio executives are openly admitting that they want to starve workers out and crush the unions into oblivion. But that's not all. 340,000 UPS workers, represented by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, are gearing up for what could be the largest single employer strike in U.S. history on August 1st. And this is after those same workers sacrificed everything during a goddamn pandemic to deliver our packages and make UPS more profitable than it has ever been. From Starbucks and Amazon to Warrior Met Coal and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, from medieval times to the Class I freight railroads, greedy executives and their wealthy Wall Street shareholders are breaking labor laws with shameless ruling class abandon. Firing union organizers left and right, closing down unionized stores, retaliating, surveilling, bargaining in bad faith, delaying and demoralizing organizing efforts, and trying to decertify existing unions. They are playing for keeps, and they will not stop until they have taken everything from us. And I'm realizing now that Google Docs did not update the rest of my script. So I'm going to pull it up on my phone. But when working people are under attack, what do? When working people are under attack, what do? Hell yeah. No one is coming to save us. We're all we've got. Now is the time to dig deep inside of ourselves and find out what we're truly made of. And that is what regular people, working people, people like you and me are doing every day all around us. That is what our amazing panelists and their co-workers have done and continue to do. And today, we're going to talk about them, their struggles, and how to fight and win. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up and we're going to get to our amazing panelists. Let's give it up one more time for Harry Marino and Jamie Edwards. I'm moving back to the table now. And you guys can see me over there? Okay. All right. So we've got about 45 minutes. We're going to try to leave a little time for Q&A if we can, but we have these two incredible human beings here. I want to talk to them as much as I possibly can, so we will try to make time for Q&A at the end. But yeah, let's get rolling here with the first round around the table. Now, on my show, Working People, I often get to, sit down and have deep one-on-one conversations with workers about their lives, their backstories, how they came to be the people they are and do the work that they do. We don't have time to do all of that here now, but I wanted to sort of do a shortened version of that, specifically focusing on how each of you walked that path to becoming a labor organizer. Right, so I was wondering if we could go around. Jamie, we'll start with you, and if you could just introduce yourselves a bit more to our lovely audience. Tell them about your own personal path to organizing, and yeah, what's the story behind why you and your coworkers took that fateful step and decided to organize in your workplaces?
All right, so hello everybody. I'm Jamie Edwards. So I'm from Springfield, Mass. I am working at the Hadley, Massachusetts store, which was the first Trader Joe's store to unionize. So pretty much the story with me was I had already had fairly left-wing politics. I had very particular labor politics well before the organizing started, before the pandemic. And a lot of the other people at the store sort of were on the same page. A lot of us wanted to see this be a store that was unionized, but it wasn't something we were ever actively pursuing or something we ever thought that there was enough support to even try to do. It was kind of like a pipe dream at that point. Then fast forward to the pandemic, and I think this is going to be people are probably tired of hearing people say the same thing, but that's always going to be a consistent thing in everyone's story when they're talking about new labor, because that was sort of the flashpoint where everybody realized this is no longer just this thing that we want because it fits what we think is ideal for a workplace. Is now a thing that we need. We have to have some say in our workplace because it's now a matter of our safety, So when the pandemic first started, at my store in particular, one of the first things that our store captain told us at the time was all right, I know a lot of you guys are worried about this pandemic and everything, or about this coronavirus. This is before it was at a pandemic stage. It was early on, and the first thing he said was a lot of people are talking about wearing masks and gloves to work, but we want you to know that you can't do that because it'll scare the customers. So it was with that being sort of the opening of the pandemic, we're all right, we have to do something here. We can't just say all right, we're gonna let you let us get sick because you're worried that'll scare customers. And mind you, at that stage we knew nothing about it yet. For all we knew, this was something that could just wipe out the entire store in a day or something. And the idea that we would be blocked from taking any kind of safety precautions, even the idea of them not providing the gloves or the masks and whatnot would be one thing, but the idea of us not even being able to bring our own seemed fairly absurd. So at that point we started having a lot of conversations and everything. People were upset about it, and at that point all it amounted to was people getting together with some of their friends and trying to ask management about it and add some pressure. But obviously, if you want to really organize workers' power, you have to be very careful with anything like that, because you want to make sure that if you're making really serious demands, that you kind of have the infrastructure to protect the workers when management inevitably tries to retaliate. So fast forward quite some time. I was talking with some of my coworkers. We were trying to get together a union, and we were pretty much just having some conversations in the night crew. At Trader Joe's, there's a group of people who work at nights and mornings, and a lot of times there's almost no crossover. There'll be some people who work mids, but you could go years without seeing somebody who works in the morning crew. So pretty much I was organizing in the nights, and we had a little scare about a security leak where somebody who was organizing adjacent to what we were doing, but not part of the union thing, just trying to put together petitions, they were found out and they were fired. And then I assume because of my close association with them, they probably figured that we had something to do with it. And the same day that person came in the store and talk to me about the union in a not particularly coded way, I was pulled in the back and given a write-up. So at that point, we sort of like, we were like, we're gonna like wait this out a little bit till things cool down. And that was pretty much how, like, that was my entry point to the organizing stuff in terms of Trader Joe's. And then like early the next year, Meg, our director of communications, actually reached out to me, and she had an organizing committee that was already operating in the morning crew, which was like the really tough thing. We couldn't get through to the mornings. So once we sort of like joined forces there, we were able to like cover a lot of the store. Like, I don't know if I would say quickly, because like I don't really know like how long it typically takes for a store our size, but like within a couple of months, we went from that starting point to having our majority. So like that's pretty much the story of how that all started. And there's a lot more in terms of like what it was like dealing with the union busting and everything. And I think there's I think everyone sort of has an idea of like what union busting looks like. And depending on the company you're dealing with or whatever anti-union firm that they're working with, it can look very different. I think that our store, they knew that they couldn't just like bring in consultants and then like either not say they were consultants or openly say that they are. They knew that people would be like sort of put off by that. So like a lot of the anti-union rhetoric was sort of like based off of these like appeals to emotion where, you know, we're a family and we're close with management and all this stuff. And a lot of it came from other crew members, unfortunately. And it was pretty much set up in a way where like anti-unioners were like given free rein to do like literally whatever they want in that store. Whereas the way it normally works, we'll have like a log with our shifts like broken down by the hour. But the people who are anti-unioners, they might be on the log for register for 2 hours, but you'll see them just take like a bunch of people outside to have like a whole anti-union meeting. You know what I mean? They're like, they go out for a cart run and then they'll be out there standing by like a full stack of carts for like several hours talking to someone. So it was a lot of that. And we had to deal with a lot of like abuse at the store from other people we worked with, whether it was like people being screamed at when they're coming in to shop for their groceries because we're quote unquote breaking up the family. Stuff like that. So that was like the side of it that we were getting from like the other people we worked with. Not to mention some of the online stuff, which I actually like more. I was called Jamie Trump on Twitter. Jamie Trump and hashtag a piece of crap wrapped in human shell. So they get very creative on there. So yeah, that's what it was like in terms of like the people we worked with. And in terms of management, like a lot of the union busting was sort of the stuff you would expect, a little bit more blatant than I would have expected. I remember being sent home for wearing a union pin one time. And that was an interesting conversation because there was so much happening at that time. Like this was literally a day where outside of the store, there was like a photo shoot happening because we had an article that was about to drop about the union drive. And I went outside for a cart run and I'm having a conversation with Tony, who is now our director of organizing. And then a manager comes out and like gives me some shit for having a conversation with him. And I go back inside, and then she tells me like, "Oh, also that union pin, that you can't wear that. It's against dress code." And I'm like, "Are you sure you want to say that?" And she's like, "Yes." And I went into my phone, went to the NLRB website, and like literally showed her the law. And she's like, "Okay, but that's not what it says in our handbook." Yeah. And I'm like, are you under the impression that like federal law is subservient to Trader Joe's handbook? But she insisted that you take it off or you leave, and so I chose to leave, which is funny because later on we take a more cautious approach of just like comply then file an unfair labor practice after, which is generally the safest way to go about a situation like that. So yeah, after that, Meg was sent home. One of our organizers, Woody, was like threatened with not getting his next raise if he wore a union pin. So it was very blatant. You know, I mean, these were all like textbook union busting things that I kind of didn't expect for them to do so overtly at the store. But the funny thing is like we ended up just doing like a red shirt day because like they thought that we weren't able to still like openly show our support of the union. And we were able to, in a way that for most places wouldn't really be a big deal, but people were like really nervous about this. And it was very exciting to see like how big of a deal it was to management, because like seeing them frantically run around the store a week before the election was great. Like that day, they were like speed running every unfair labor practice. They were specifically asking people, why are you wearing red? Do you support the union? All of that stuff. Yeah. One kid, they're like, why are you wearing red? He's like, I didn't even know that this was a thing. Like he just happened to be wearing red that day, you know? And that kid was going to vote against the union. And then after that, he literally told me, like, because of that, I'm going to vote for the union. I'm like, word, that works. I'm all about it. Yeah. So, like, there was a lot of that going on. And pretty much we ended up having, like, a big rally outside the store, like, right before the election, a couple of days before. And to see, like, the change of how it was, like, when we first went public, with a lot of people being, like, afraid to openly support the union, to people being willing to like be out in front of the store, you know what I mean, doing chants with us and stuff. It was a really cool transformation. And it's just like, there's just a lot of power in like having those like, those actions that just increase in like seriousness and stakes over time, to sort of like work people into being like, to being a little bit more bold at what they're willing to do, and for people to realize that they don't really have to be afraid, and it's the company who should be afraid of us. So yeah, so we won our election, and then now we have 3 other locals. We have one in Minneapolis, Louisville, Kentucky, and in Oakland, California. So yeah.
Woo!
That's just general backstory. I'm sure we're gonna have like more conversation about stuff. So.
Oh yeah.
All right, so I'm Harry Marino. I am currently an assistant general counsel at the Major League Baseball Players Association, which as of September of last year represents minor league players. Before coming over to the MLBPA, I was the executive director of a nonprofit called Advocates for Minor Leaguers, which really led the grassroots organizing of minor league baseball players. I'm also a former minor league player. I played back in 2012, 13, and 14 for the Baltimore Orioles and Arizona Diamondbacks minor league affiliates. And I guess my story in terms of how I became an organizer is, I guess like everyone's, is unique. I never thought that I would be a union organizer. Certainly growing up, I didn't grow up in a union household or anything like that. I was only sort of somewhat conscious of labor politics and whatnot. But when I got into the minor leagues, you know, as most people do, right? If you become a professional athlete, you think that's a dream come true, right? This is what you've worked for your whole life since you were, you know, 7, 8 years old, and now you've finally got a chance to do it, and you're, you know, excited, and you know, you don't really think past like, let me just try to get a chance to do this. And I remember the time that I got my first paycheck, I started to do the math, and I was like, where's the rest of it? And I asked, I was like, what's going on here? And they're like, oh no, this is it. So I did the math, and I was like, wait, so, but I thought you said we don't get paid in the off season either. And they're like, no, you don't. And I was like, all right, so I'm doing the math. And I'm like, that's $3,300 for the whole year. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, how much, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to, like, live? And like, you're going to get another job and you're going to figure it out. That's what we do. And I was like, wow. So it definitely, like, right off the bat, I was like, this is not what I expected, and this doesn't add up. I mean, I knew that the teams were really profitable, and I knew that the top major league players were getting paid really well. So I knew that it wasn't a fact of you can't pay these players more than you're paying them. It was you don't have to and you don't want to, so you're not going to, right? And part of the reason why was a dynamic that I don't think is totally unique to minor league baseball or to professional sports, although it's probably exacerbated a little bit in professional sports, which is the carrot of making the major leagues was kind of held over everyone's head, right? So it was like, yeah, you're only going to get $3,300 now, and maybe for the next, 5, 6, 7 years till you make it to the major leagues. Oh, by the way, only 1 in 10 of you are going to make it to the major leagues, and oh, by the way, the average career is only a couple years, even at, in the major leagues. But, that's your dream. So that's what you're going to do, right? Because if you won't, we'll go find someone else who will. And, right off the bat, I mean, obviously when you're getting paid that little, there's all kinds of other, issues that come with it. When you're only making $3,000 a year, you want to save costs wherever you can. So we would live, traditionally minor league players would live 6, 7, 8 guys to a 2-bedroom apartment. Everyone would just jam as many air mattresses as you could into an apartment, and that's where everyone lived for the season. Like fast food for every meal. Just doing whatever you had to do to get by. And some of it was like, this is a rite of passage, but most people knew like this is not right. But nobody wanted to say anything about it because everyone wanted to make the big leagues, and at the end of the day thought, if I'm the one who speaks up, then there's going to be the other 25 guys in the clubhouse who are going to stick around. They're just going to replace me. So it was a huge just sort of collective action problem of who's going to be the first person to jump in. And back when I played, there was not a lot of energy, I would say, or appetite to organize. There was complaining for sure, but there was no real like, we're going to actually do something about it. But I went off. I finished playing, played 3 years in the minor leagues, didn't make it to the major leagues, and I went to law school. I'd gone to college before entering the minor leagues, and had kind of thought I wanted to go to law school before getting the chance to play professionally. So I did that, and I actually wrote in my law school admissions essay about the way that minor league players were treated. And I was like, this is a perfect example of a group of people that need some kind of representation. That was basically what I wrote about, and I was like, I don't know how that's going to happen, but I know that a lawyer can probably do something about that, and this is the kind of thing that I'd like to do, is stand up for people who don't have a voice. And at the time, I would say if you'd asked me will you ever actually help minor league players, or much less unionize minor league players, I would say I don't think so. I think it was more just an example for me. But lo and behold, fast forward 6 or 7 years, and it's 2020, and I'm working at a law firm in Washington, D.C., and I am following baseball as I continued to do, and I read an article on ESPN.com about this organization, Advocates for Minor Leaguers, that was being formed to try to provide a collective voice for minor league players. And I was like, holy shit, this is really cool. I can't believe that somebody's actually doing this. This is really overdue. And I knew they listed the founders, and I knew one of them, and I just picked up the phone and I called him, and I was like, what's this about? And he was like, we all know it's wrong and something's got to change. And we basically just said, somebody's got to take the first step here. And I was like, that's awesome. I want to be a part of it. And so left the law firm. We didn't at the time have any money or any real connection to current players or really anything. But we pretty quickly realized that all the power was with the players, right? That we weren't going to be able to be sort of some third party, even as former players, right? That kind of sat out on the outskirts and agitated, that we could only do so much with that, and that all the power was going to come from actually connecting with current players and figuring out, really how far they wanted to take this. If there was no energy or appetite to take it anywhere, then probably nothing would have happened. But as we got into the conversations with players, we found out that there was a lot of appetite for it, and things had changed. And part of it, to what Jamie said, was the pandemic, right? So minor league players got sent home one day when the pandemic broke out, and basically were told, go train and stay, and we could call you back to play a game at any time. And you're not getting paid, and you have no representation, you have nothing. And so guys were just literally spread out across the country and the world. About half of minor league players are from basically Dominican Republic or Venezuela. There's academies down there that are a hub for minor league players before they come to the States. And so everyone kind of went home and just was sitting around waiting. And meanwhile, the major league players who were in the Major League Baseball Players Association were negotiating at the table with MLB about return to play. What are going to be the health and safety protocols? How much are we going to get paid? How many games are we going to play? How are we going to navigate this, as equal partners? And minor league players were just sitting at home, just literally just watching the news, being maybe I'll have to show up for work tomorrow, maybe I won't. And so that plus the same time, Major League Baseball unilaterally cut 40 teams, just decided they didn't want 40 of the teams and cut 1,000 players overnight. So those two things happened that exacerbated the kind of like long-standing issues that had always been there and really brought to guys like the forefront of their minds that like, hey, we need a union, right? And one good thing about professional sports from a unionization perspective is all of the major sports leagues have unions. So it's not totally, kind of foreign to players. They understand this is part of the norm in sports. So, it wasn't probably as, polarizing as it might be in some workplaces, say, oh, union. It was more just like, we would really just say like players association, like this is the norm. And it didn't seem as like out there to a lot of people who really didn't know anything about unions. So, the story from there, I'm sure we can get into more, but I think, and there were lots of ups and downs and wasn't necessarily a straight line, but that was kind of my path into it was kind of a different route of going away from the game for a while and then coming back to it when the time was right, and very, very happy that I did.
Hell yeah. Well, let's build on that. Let's kind of talk about kind of on the ground what that organizing looked like, right? Because I mean, the title of this session is From Online to Offline Organizing. We ultimately want everyone in this room and everyone who watches this panel to walk away with, actionable lessons that they can take to their workplaces as well. And I think just again, the very fact that we're having this conversation is so incredible and exciting, because for most of my lifetime and most of ours, right? I mean, the general common wisdom was that if you were dealing with this kind of crap at your work, you have two options: stay and take it, or leave, right? The common refrain. If you don't like it, why don't you just leave, right? So those are the only two options I ever considered when I was working all my crappy low-wage jobs as a temp in warehouses and factories, pizza delivery guy. I worked retail. I was a waiter here in Chicago at Reza's. The location no longer exists because the manager drove it into the ground. But I didn't know there was a secret third thing, a different way to sort of handle issues at work, and that in fact it was my and my coworkers' right to do something about it. Right? But we live in a society where the deck is so stacked in favor of the bosses that for workers to exercise their right, Constitution gives us the right to freedom of assembly, right? The NLRA, unless you are one of the categories of workers who were carved out of it for very racist reasons, guarantees the right to organize in your workplace, right? And yet, when workers try to exercise that right, we have to go through a Lord of the Rings style saga where we could be fired, our store could be closed, we could be surveilled. Even if we win our union, the company can just stall at the bargaining table like Starbucks is doing, Trader Joe's, so on and so forth, right? But again, the very fact that workers are figuring out how to come together, even if they got to do it covertly, and how we can use digital tools and, long-standing, non-digital, one-on-one organizing practices to achieve the impossible. I want to talk about what that looked like for you both in your respective campaigns, right? Because you all pulled off some Ocean's 11 shit, right? I mean, because the minor leaguers, I mean, as Harry has told me, is you got people all over the place, right? It's not like they're in one shop and you can all go meet somewheres. And also we're talking about in the middle of a pandemic, and yet they got enough cards signed that the head of the MLB voluntarily recognized them, right? And you can bet your ass he did not want to. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what the actual organizing looked like on a day-to-day basis. For folks who have heard about this organizing wave but don't necessarily know what that entails, what does organizing look like? How did certain digital tools like Action Builder or social media help you guys in those efforts? And yeah, what sort of non-digital methods of organizing did you engage in?
All right, so I can start. So I mean, tools like Action Builder for us came in like after the first election, but like I would say like the organizing leading up to the election, a lot of that was just having conversations with people and sort of building a lot of relationships with people. I think everybody at their place of work thinks that they're sort of like friends with everybody in the crew or whatever. And then when you're actually organizing, you realize like, oh wait, no, there's a lot of people who I don't know here at all. You know what I mean? And like to have a conversation with somebody where you have to sort of be like, yeah, we're going to talk privately outside of work about something related to work, and then like have a conversation with them later on that if it were to get back to management could cost you your job. You definitely have to take the time to sort of like build that rapport with people and build some level of trust. So for me, like, I mean, in general, when you're doing organizing at your workplace, you want to like start off by pretty much like mapping out relationships, and the first people you have those conversations with will be the people that you already have that level of trust with. And we had like a very strict policy of no conversations ever happening in the store. Security is like the most important thing. I always tell people that assuming that your security is tight, you pretty much have an unlimited time to organize. You know what I mean? But when people are rushing it and they sacrifice their security for the sake of speed, they end up just like not getting having a successful time organizing altogether. So a lot of this would be having these conversations with people and sort of starting off from a point of I mean, outside of starting off telling them like this is a conversation that has to stay between us and my job could be on the line if it were to get back to a manager. We also have to sort of like work our way to the union part, not really starting off with the U word, because like for the most part, at least people that I've seen, most people don't really know much about unions outside of what they've heard from their bosses. So like a lot of these people, you have to get them on the same page about issues that are happening at the store, and then after that, you might be able to get them to the point where they agree that there would be some value in us trying to get together to solve some of these issues. And then after that point, I wouldn't even necessarily ask them about like, hey, how would you feel about a union? I'd start off by asking them what they know about unions. And then that way we have like an opportunity to address like any of the misinformation that they already have heard about unions before that. So like that's usually how those conversations would start. And then, you work your way up from the people that you have that relationship with, and then you just expand your organizing committee to like accommodate for like reaching out to more people in those other networks. And if you're able to do that all before having any security leaks or anything, then you're pretty much on your way to getting your majority. And I would say like that's pretty much like that first phase of it. I definitely would say that the public part of the campaign can be a lot rougher than people expect. Once you're out in the open, in some respects, there's like less risk there because if you get retaliated against, the company can't pretend they didn't know that you were organizing. So you have some safety there, which is the reason why like a lot of times when people are organizing, they're really just like they're holding on just to get to that point where they can go public, and then they don't have to be as worried about a random person telling a manager and them getting fired, So that's a big thing too. But and I would say like in terms of like the digital tools and everything, Action Builder is very useful, and like a lot of the stuff that we were doing before the election, it would have been great to have those tools back then. Instead of having like 30 different spreadsheets with like different colors on, like I kid you not, different colors on each name to represent like, who might leave before the election happens. Like it goes down like to being so specific because like you want to account for everything when you're organizing, because like if everyone says like, yes, I will absolutely vote for this, and then by the day of the election, like everybody just put their 2 weeks notice in or something, or like the day that you go public, it's not going to be like much value. So yeah, I think tools like Action Builder are very, very helpful in terms of sort of dealing with all of that information and making it sort of usable for like easy organizing. And yeah, nothing's gonna be just like building those relationships with people and trying to like really get to know the people that you work with. That's a really important part, and that's what allows you to do the rest of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think very similar experience and very sort of similar perspective, I think, on how the digital tools and in-person kind of interact with one another. I mean, for us, so we really started by, because, okay, so as Max said, it's 5,500 players across 150 different locations. So, and we had like a couple $100,000. So like we were not going to go around to all 150 locations and do an in-person organizing effort. It wasn't going to happen. There was a lot of talk about, should we just try to do one team first, or should we try to do it, one at a time? We had a lot of those strategic conversations up front, and we ultimately decided that, a broad-based approach was going to be the best, just given the way that the major league players bargain and, the idea of trying to build power as broadly as we could. And frankly, because it didn't seem any less crazy trying to do one than all of them at once. It seemed pretty insane regardless. So we're like, let's just kind of talk to everyone. And so it really started with literally, we started with like Twitter and Facebook messages, and nobody would respond. And then like no responses. And then we would cold call some guys, and that didn't really work either. And then we started sending Instagram messages to guys, and we found that guys actually that all of the minor league baseball players were on Instagram, and that maybe 1 in 10 guys would actually respond. And so we were like, all right, this is like, I think a theme of organizing is just a lot of trial and error, right? So we were like, all right, well, let's do Instagram. Like, that's how we're going to do it. And so we really would just start, my thought was like, again, this isn't going to be some outside effort to come save the players. Like, we are former players, and like, we know the experience, and we want it to be whatever they want it to be. So really it was about asking questions. So at the first it was just like, look, we know a lot of this sucks. Like, what's the first thing you would change? And I think I literally sent like 2,000 players a message, just said like, what would be the first thing that you would change? And the vast majority said housing, because of what I had said about 5, 6, 7, 8 guys being in and at that time it was the beginning of the season, so guys had like just started the season, so they were like remembering again how terrible that was. So I think that was part of it. And so we were like, all right, let's try to just focus on one single issue of housing. And so I was fortunate throughout this to work with a lot of really great different folks, and one of them who I worked with really closely is Kevin Slack, who was our communications director. And basically we decided we were going to get stories from the players about their housing and just expose them on Twitter. And so that's basically what we started to do, was just expose the treatment of the players in terms of how they were housed on Twitter. And we really were able to build, luckily people pay attention to sports, so people pay attention to baseball. And so like we were able to kind of build pretty quickly a following where we had, 20, 25,000 followers, whatever it was. And they, were kind of retweeting everything that we were posting. And then they were like yelling at the team, hey, at Reds, why are you doing this? Yada, yada. And so that's kind of, we were really building momentum that way, just on that one single issue, and just through these like very digital, somewhat superficial at that time, interactions with guys. But as we started to do that, have those conversations, I would say, try to move guys to phone calls. That was like the idea. Like, let's say, hey, would you do a phone call and talk? And to Jamie's point, like, wouldn't like do a phone call and be like, hey, do you want to form a union? Like, that would not what we would do, right? It would just be like, hey man, like, maybe we know a player in common. Maybe we played for some team that was the same. Maybe, you just kind of start to talk, about what your experience is like. And they're like, hey, what's this advocates thing? Like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, really, we don't really know. We just know this is bullshit and we're trying to change it. And like, we're here to basically just help you do whatever you want to do to make it better. And so it was really about like building trust slowly. And then to Jamie's point, I think like you have to build on existing relationships of trust, right? So like you can't build as one organizer, a relationship of trust with 5,000 players. That's just not possible, right? And we only ever ended up having, I think, like 5 or 6 organizers for all 5,500 players. So, you can't even build a relationship of trust with 1,000 guys. You have to build on existing relationships. So, we would be able to build some of those relationships from scratch, from an initial Instagram message and to a phone call to building a relationship. But ultimately then, those guys would have to turn around and go and build in, and kind of build with their networks, right? And go to the people that they had relationships of trust with and say, hey, like, this is happening. This is pretty cool. Like, maybe we actually can make something change here, right? And so really throughout 2021, that's really what we were doing, was just like the social media and the Instagram messages and all that kind of stuff and just initial phone calls. And then right at the end of the season, we had, and I think this is common with in any group setting, we had some teams and players that were like way out in front and were like, let's form a union now, let's form a union now. And then some people that didn't want to talk to us and everything in between. And so we happened to have 2 teams that were really, both very energized about doing something, and they wanted to like do a demonstration. And so what we said, all right, we had these wristbands made that said advocates for minor leaguers on one side and fair ball on the other side. And we went to the game, we were like, what, you wear them all on the field today, and put out a statement. And it like scared the shit out of the league, because they were like, they did not think players were ever going to like do anything like that, right? In retrospect, it was maybe even a little risky, like, to make that big of a move at that point. But what happened was literally 3 days later, the league, because they were so kind of surprised, caved and gave free housing to the players. They just said, we've seen all the tweets and everything. And they're like, we've seen all this and we're gonna fix it, right? And obviously, in retrospect, that was just an attempt to like appease and make this go away and say like, this is going to be the end. Like, we'll just give them housing, they'll shut up, and they'll go away. At that point, the organizing got really important, because it was about messaging that as, no, you did this. Like, you guys won this by making this demonstration. They didn't just hand you free housing. And so we really were able to message that with the players, and then what was an attempt to appease really turned into our greatest organizing tool, because at that point, every call for the next 6 months was, look what you just won housing on literally like 2 teams wearing wristbands for 1 game, right? Like, imagine what we could do if we formed a union. You guys have way more power than you think. And that resonated with guys. And so at that point, that's when we kind of hired up. We got more connected with the Major League Union, got more funding to hire more former players as organizers, got connected with Mark at Action Network, and they were like immediately like, let's figure out how to problem solve this. And at that point, to Jamie's point, we had like all these Google Sheets that literally I was the only person that could understand them. They were like insane and didn't make any sense. And we needed to come up with an actual database that would be, that 6 or 7 people could work on and understand. And we did, and the tools were great for us in terms of being able to divide up turf among the different organizers and know, who was in charge of which clubhouse and where we were strong and where we were weak. And we leaned really heavily on the tools. We worked with Christian Norton at Concerted Action, who was incredibly helpful and adept at using the tools, and helped a bunch of former baseball players with no tech ability to like actually figure out how to use these tools to our advantage. And so, from that point, I would say a lot of what we did was like Zoom calls, and then it would just reinforce, right? So we'd do like the Zoom calls with our building committee, where we'd have conversations or texts and phone calls and all that kind of stuff, which was really traditional, one-to-one and group organizing. And then we would supplement it with tests. We ran like petitions and surveys just to test our support, and we kind of saw as we built from 1,000 people who signed this petition to 2,000 who filled out this survey to 3,000, and then at a certain point things came together, and the major league players voted to support the effort, and at that point we felt pretty comfortable that we had the support to go for it. And one thing that's really beneficial about having the tools is just the level of confidence we had then. I think about where our support was. Like, we knew where we were strong, we knew where we weren't, we knew where we had to focus energy, we knew where we didn't need to deploy I didn't need to send, Josh Tolley, who was one of our, kind of our top organizer, to go, handle this organization, because we had like 6 players who were great and were going to handle, like, they were going to get those cards signed, right? So instead, Josh, you go and deal with this team where we have like, we don't have any great leaders. We have a few guys who are on the fence. And so, like, that ability to really look at the whole landscape and figure out where to put your energy, I mean, I think that, to me, was the most important use of the tool. But at the end of the day, it's all about relationships of trust. There's no, it's a cliche, but there really are no shortcuts. I mean, it is just tons of work to organize. But as I think I said earlier, I mean, we ended up, once we got voluntarily recognized and then bargained, a contract, now, I think we did the math, and it was like, over the course of the next 5 years, which is the deal, it's a $600 million win for the players. So, I mean, like, it's worth it, right? I mean, so that's the thing, I think, is all the players now that at the beginning they were like, I don't know, and we're on the fence, now they're like, yeah, totally 100% worth it, and worth the hard work that it takes.
Hell yeah. It's worth it, and you're worth it, right? We're all worth more, right? And I think that's really, the takeaway message here, and together we can win our worth, right? And we have just a few minutes left before we got to get out of here, so if it's okay with everyone, I want to do one more sort of round around the table to ask Jamie and Harry to just sort of talk about where things stand now, right? How, like, what sorts of obstacles you may be going up against, and how you're overcoming them, like the union busting or bad faith bargaining and delays at the bargaining table, like, and also what role all of us have to play in that, right? Because that's another really essential part of this story. I want to say on the media side, for anyone who knows me or knows the work that we do at the Real News Network, right, the example that I always give from last year is that, I and my colleague Mel Buer were interviewing railroad worker after railroad worker long before anyone in the national media gave a shit about the crisis on the freight rail system. Then, in September, when the rest of the country is like, oh shit, we may have a railroad strike or a railroad shutdown, where did this happen? We're like, well, here you go, here's a bunch of workers that you can listen to. And then when Scab Joe Biden broke the railroad workers' strike in late November, along with Democrats and Republicans in Congress, yeah, clap it up, fuck them, sorry. But like, people were asking me, they're like, are the railroaders gonna go on a wildcat strike? And my answer was like, you tell me, like, why would they at this point? Because if they're going to take that step, if they're going to risk their jobs, if they're going to risk their pensions and all their years of accrued seniority, they're going to need to know that we, the public, their fellow workers, are going to be there with them every step of the way. And the question then is, where have we been for the 1,100 coal miners at Warrior Met Coal who've been on strike for 2 years? The workers at CNH Industrial in the Midwest who were on strike for 9 months last year? The Starbucks workers whose stores, all unionized stores in Ithaca, have been closed down. Where have we been? Have we been showing up enough to give our fellow workers the confidence that we will be there when it counts the most, right? And if we do show up, that gives our fellow workers more ability to take that fateful step, more confidence that they can withstand the pressure from the bosses. We all can help ensure that our fellow workers win these struggles. And when we win, then we fight harder the next time, right? So that's how we kind of keep things moving. And there are many ways to do that. Social media is a very important one, right? Like UPS I don't know who's running the UPS Twitter account, but some dumbass thought it would be a good idea this week to tweet, hey, if you're a part-time UPSer, tell us about how good you have it. Oh, shit. And they have just been quote tweeted into the dust for the past 3 days, and it's been beautiful to watch. But that's just the first step. Again, so definitely let these companies know. Let the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, let Starbucks, let all of these companies know that you as a customer, you as a citizen, you as a fellow worker stand with their workers and stand against their union busting. That's one essential way. Circulate the news. Come to us at the Real News Network if there's a story that we can report on. In the back there, you've got Trader Joe's merch that you can buy to help support their efforts. They have a fund that you can donate to. Go to the store and say you support them. Action Builder, Action Network folks are back there. If you want to organize in your workplace, if you think you can use these tools, go talk to them, right? So we all have a role to play here, I guess, is my point. And so with the final few minutes that we have, I wanted to just ask Jamie and Harry if, you had any kind of final comments on where things stand now, what obstacles you're facing and how you're sort of overcoming them, and what we can all do to help.
So where things stand, I would say, like, in terms of particularly in the Hadley store, there's a lot going on right now surrounding somebody who is unfairly fired. One of our people was terminated supposedly for leaving a jigsaw in the store, which wasn't his to begin with and was there before he was there. So we've been doing a lot of action surrounding that lately. Shortly after he was terminated, we got a petition together with 53 other workers, and then we had a separate action, which was trying to get people on board to actually march with me to the manager's little counter spot and actually bring the petition there. And we had people filming and stuff, so that's always fun to see the managers panicking a little bit. But then 2 weeks later, we did the real action that was sort of just like the setup for, where we had a walkout. It was probably the biggest action that we've done at our location since we've won the election. There's only 6 people still working in the building. We were all outside. We had people come in who weren't working that day. We had people who were former employees there. A lot of outpouring of support from the labor community in general. It was really cool. We got to march back and forth in front of the store and enrage my store manager, which is what I'm really in this for. It's always a big part of it. But yeah, that's a little bit of what's going on right now at the store in terms of ways that people can help. Really, we're here today at Netroots so we can build these relationships with people and find ways that we can show up for others and ways others can show up for us and we can collaborate. So I would say after this panel is done, people can come up here and have a conversation with me about some of that stuff. Also, if you manage an email list or social media accounts, it would be good if you guys could ask some of your supporters to help get involved in our fight. That would be another way. And let's see. Yeah, and also online contributions are critical for us. Continue building our union. So if you work for a nonprofit or labor organization with a large email list, the same part. I'm going through my notes over here. But of course we also have this really cool merch that we have here too. So you can see over here. I have my one somewhere over here too. So yeah, high quality stuff.
So look, we were very fortunate that we prepared certainly and inoculated the guys for, a terrible sort of union busting campaign. And we were just fortunate that because of some of the outside leverage and frankly, because of just decisions that management made, which, they didn't have to make, that they ended up voluntarily recognizing us and really bargaining. It wasn't the most fun process, but it was, essentially in good faith. And so we got a contract on March 30th, the day before opening day. So at this point, it's certainly just the beginning of the minor league players being part of the Major League Baseball Players Association, and we'll be, building obviously for years to come. But I think, from my perspective, the sort of advice I would give, or my, 2 cents would be, everyone said to me personally and to the folks that I worked with, minor league players can't be unionized. It was just the conventional wisdom. It was it can't happen. It's really nice that you're trying. That's cute, but it's never going to happen. So just figure out ways to make it better on the margins or whatever, because it's never going to happen. And, it happened, right? And I think that the message that I would hope people take out from our campaign, where, look, I think we did things right, but I also think we got lucky. That's the reality. And I think it's important to like be able to say that sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you get unlucky in life, right? And we got lucky and did things right, and it worked out. And hopefully, because of the visibility of sports and baseball and people like knowing about the campaign, what that does is sort of inspire and empower people to go and take on these quote unquote impossible fights, because they're not, right? I mean, the reality is we saw it with the wristbands, we saw it with the hundreds of millions of dollars that were on the table in the CBA. Like, the reality is that the players were not as replaceable as they had been made to believe, that the players had a lot more power than they realized, and that power was best put to use when everyone worked together, right? And that's really the story of, I think, any workplace and any really, labor movement, is people realizing their worth and then coming together to make things better. And I think if it could happen for minor league baseball players, where everyone said this is impossible for these 27 reasons, then it can happen anywhere, and it's worth doing. So that's that's kind of my 2 cents on the situation.
Let's give it up for our panelists, y'all. Thank you all so much for coming. I know we got to clear out, but yes, please come talk to the amazing Trader Joe's crew. Come talk to Harry. Action Builder folks are back there. Come hit up me and my colleague John Duda there for the real news. Thank you all so much. Solidarity forever.